Welcome to KRQE's New Mexico News Insiders, 2025 Regional Edward R. Murrow Award winner for Best Podcast. Here's Gabrielle Burkhart and Chris McKee.
We are nearing 4 years since the largest, most destructive wildfire sparked by the federal government destroyed generational homes and properties in northern New Mexico. And we're still talking about it today because to this day, not everybody has been repaid for those losses, despite promises from President Biden at the time and the federal government back in 2022 to, quote,
fully compensate survivors for their total loss.
Under the direction of FEMA, the Hermits Peak Calf Canyon Claims Office has been operating for nearly 3 years. More than $5 billion is set aside to cover losses, but the process of getting that money out the door, it is far from over. And it continues to be controversial as well, with recent calls from our state's governor and the state's congressional delegation asking for the resignation of the claims office director, Jay Mitchell.
Yeah, we're going to get into all of that today. Let's just introduce our guests. We have Brian Colon, former state auditor, now managing partner of Singleton Schreiber's New Mexico offices, representing a lot of the wildfire victims. Also, Jesse Gallegos, a senior attorney who works on this case daily. Thank you both so much for being here.
You bet, Gabby. It's great to be back in studio, and thank you for inviting us.
Thanks for having us and shining the light on this important subject.
For sure. So let's start with you, Brian. You know, the last time I interviewed you about this issue was for an investigation that we published in May of 2024. We were talking then about what was just taking so long for the claims process for these wildfire victims. It's still not over today. So there was a suspicion from locals that I heard when I visited Mora that certain people were able to bump to the front of the line to get their claims paid quicker, depending on who they knew, right? Today, it seems like that's still an accusation, this time all the way to the top of leadership with the FEMA claims office, the governor now accusing Director Jay Mitchell of putting his own FEMA claims before others. Governor Lujan Grisham's office sent us a statement in early February saying, quote, Mr. Mitchell should resign immediately. If he doesn't, the governor asks that the federal government remove him from his position without hesitation and without pay and open an investigation into this matter, end quote. So pretty serious call from our governor. Let's just start there. What can you tell us about this situation? Why is our congressional delegation calling for the director to step down?
Well, I appreciate the question. And let me just say this. I am grateful that our governor is paying close attention and that she has been very clear in her message, which is Jay Mitchell has got to go. He has violated the trust of the people of northern New Mexico yet again on behalf of FEMA. These are communities that have been re-traumatized time and time and time again. We worked very diligently. In fact, when we last visited, I think I was talking about that the director had to change, and that was Angela Gladwell at the time, because she had completely failed the community in executing on the president's directive, which was to make northern New Mexico whole, to compensate them for the government's negligence in burning over 340,000 acres in our beautiful land of enchantment. And the governor, has not hesitated. She has provided leadership on this and has said that these accusations, what appears to be true, is absolutely unacceptable. And the story continues to develop. And there's a reason that the governor has stood tall. Our congressional delegation has stood tall. Martin Zamora, a candidate for Congress, has been clear in his calling for the ouster of the current director, Jay Mitchell. And in fact, even our two leading candidates for governor on the Democratic ticket have both said, Jay Mitchell's got to go. Like, at some point, you've got to realize that the trust has been broken so deeply that it is irreparable. And Jay Mitchell has got to get the message that he has lost the right to try to lead in northern New Mexico. He has zero credibility today.
You shared some text messages your office received from Director Mitchell back in April. The first message reads, quote, one of your clients decided to pull a weapon on me, you, Jerry, and Crystal Meth, making fun of one of my senior attorneys on these cases are real ducking dirtbags. A follow-up message from Mitchell clarified that he meant to use the F word, as I understand in that case. When you got those messages, what was going through the minds of y'all working in the office? What was he referring to?
Well, let me be clear, because I'm not sure your intonation you've added to the text message, because you added my commentary on there. And when I was speaking to your team to camera, I was elaborating where he said crystal meth. So Crystal is the name of my senior attorney that works daily with Jesse, who's here to my left. Crystal has worked tirelessly for our clients with Jesse every single day for the last 3 years to try and get a full compensation for our clients. And Crystal is really above reproach. She is clear, she understands the guidelines, she understands the law, and she is one of the best advocates we have. Between Jesse and Crystal, I couldn't ask for a better team on this case. But when I was reading the text message to camera, I was saying that the reference to crystal meth
It's making
was
fun of one of your senior attorneys
exactly.
on the case.
I mean, now let me give you more context. That text message came in at 10:30 at night. To me, not to my office, to my personal cell phone, Jay Mitchell, in an act of unprofessionalism that is unmatched. I mean, I've been in a lot of rooms, and I've been in a lot of positions where I've had to deal with a lot of folks. And I have not seen that lack of professionalism from a civil servant in a very long time. So 10:30 at night, he sends me that message and then follows up and says, actually, I meant to send you the F word. I'm sorry that autocorrect. Actually, he didn't say sorry. He just said autocorrect fixed it. I hated that. And that message came in, I think, at closer to midnight. So he waited an hour. I don't know if he was enjoying libations and their drunk text messages. I can only speculate why a civil servant would send me a text message like that at 10:30 at night and then find it appropriate to follow up with the F word at midnight. Like, what possesses a leader to do that? Well, a leader doesn't do that. And that's why Jay Mitchell has to go. He's been unprofessional throughout this process. I chose not to bring those to light sooner because I wanted this system to work. I have always had my clients centered on this case. And whatever I had to take, whatever abuse he wanted to give me, if my clients could get their cases resolved, I was willing to take it.
Do you feel like you guys have always had sort of like an adversarial role with the FEMA claims office because of just the positions that you all are in, or has it been worse since Jay Mitchell took the helm?
You know, I do think it's been worse. I will just say that the system is adversarial, right? Their job is to do an evaluation. My job is to do an evaluation for my clients, understanding all I know as an attorney. And Jesse is one of the best. And they have advanced these claims in a way that maximizes and the recovery so that these people who've been burned out of their homes and who've been suffering for 3 years because of this trauma due to the federal government's negligence when they lit that match, that they got compensated. So it's an adversarial process by the nature of the system, right?
Right.
But what's not appropriate is a lack of professionalism. Now, the challenge for Jay is that from day one, our firm took the position that there were certain areas where damages were permissible under the act because of New Mexico law. He took a position 180 degrees off of that and said, we're not willing to compensate the victims of the Hermits Peak Calf Canyon for non-economic damages. Well, we've taken that issue to federal court. And quite honestly, time and time again, a very respected federal judge, George W. Bush appointee, Republican judge, so not necessarily anybody who is a champion one way or the other, but he did the legal analysis, and he has been on our side almost every single time. Right, Jesse?
That's absolutely correct. And a lot of it also comes down to the underlying purpose of the Hermits Peak Calf Canyon Fire Assistance Act and what Congress intended when they enacted that, which was expedited compensation to these victims. And here we are almost 4 years after the fire, and that has made things necessarily more adversarial because the purpose isn't being accomplished.
Good point. And the reason I bring up about the judge, because I think Jay Mitchell's on the ropes, right? Like, part of why he is, I'm trying to find reasons why he could be so inappropriate. Look, you all know me. New Mexico knows me. I'm generally thought of as a pretty nice guy. And so I've never been disrespectful to Jay Mitchell. I literally can look him in the eye and say, you can't say a single time when I've been disrespectful to you, Jay. I have always been professional. And he's sending me those messages. And I think it's partly because he's on the ropes. Time and time again, we're beating him in court. We're beating him on this claims process, and we're holding him accountable to do his job. He has now shown unequivocally he's not fit to do that job, and he has got to go.
You mentioned these messages, they came in April, right? So it's been almost a year since that. Have you had any communication with him? Does it continue at all at any level?
I think we had some meetings after that, but certainly in consult, look, when I got those messages, obviously I got angry, right? I was like, I can't believe that a civil servant is going to send these messages out. Like, how unabashed are you with your lack of professionalism that you're literally going to send me a text message? You know that you can't make it disappear. I'm going to have it. So I'll be honest. I called my partner and said, look, this is unbelievable. And he said, take a deep breath. He said, your instinct to not respond is the right instinct. Just relax and do your job. And your job is to be the best advocate you can for your clients. And I don't think publicizing those text messages puts you in a position to do that. And I held.
Did you respond to those messages at the time?
Not at all. No, I chose not to. There is no great response. My instant response would have been pretty unprofessional as well.
Yeah.
But thankfully I took a deep breath and chose not to respond.
Yeah. It's like if you don't have anything nice to say.
Won't say anything at all.
Yeah. We'll be right back with more of the New Mexico News Insiders.
KRQE News 13 investigations. One of the biggest cons in New Mexico history. How did they get away with it?
Well, they had an accomplice. The state of New Mexico.
A road rage encounter leads to murder.
I miss him every single day.
Did the judicial system fail here?
New Mexico's families, homes, and lives are left in ashes.
There's a level of anxiety.
FEMA has been an abject and abysmal failure.
Watch anytime on krqe.com or our YouTube channel.
So we mentioned the amount of money set aside to repay victims of this government-sparked wildfire. It totals $5.45 billion, and the funding it's meant to cover eligible losses, including personal injury, loss of property, business and financial loss. So at last check, the FEMA Claims Office says on its website that it's paid so far $3.36 billion with a B. High level, though, what do you all see is making this process take so long?
Well, I'm gonna ask Jesse to kind of give a little more color commentary on that, but I will just say that part of the problem with this process, and it actually impacts Jay directly, part of the problem with this process was when Jay came in, it had been very clear that it had been as slow as molasses to get any funds into the community that had been so traumatized. And people were really, really hurting. So how can we distribute as much money as possible? I have an idea. How about we establish an area where we will pay smoke and ash damage for cleanup? So we'll come up with a baseline per square foot, have people justify and prove up their structures, and we'll pay per square foot. We'll just hand out checks. You get a check, you get a check, you get a check. Oh, and by the way, Jay, you get a check too, which is the problem here. Because it's my understanding, and from what I've seen, he jumped the line while others who were more severely damaged have not gotten a check. So a good portion, and we don't know exactly how much, and if we do, Jesse will correct me, but I don't think we know exactly how much of that $3.3 billion has been smoke and ash claims. But we know that people have been far more injured, and their claims are still pending. People who have lost structures, who've lost their homes, who've been displaced. I have one client who's still living in Rio Rancho with his children, and he calls me and says, look, I love my children, they love me, but enough's enough. They can't take it. My grandchildren deserve their house back. And people are at their wits' end. Jesse, am I anything there?
You're absolutely right. And I think there's also a layer of staffing issues that they've been dealing with. A lot of the claims office staff are third-party contractors. And as a result of the way it's been managed, as these contracts lapse, they don't have new contractors ready and in the training pipeline to be ready to meaningfully contribute. And as a result, that just exacerbates the delays even further, which is where they're at right now, to where they've suspended even biweekly meetings to go over particular claims and get answers and progress updates and status updates. And they're not able to do that because they don't have the staff trained the way they should be.
Interesting. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if you are someone who's lost your entire house, are you filing a smoke and ash claim?
No, that's going to be a total loss claim.
Yeah.
Which we're getting priority
Right.
in their stated policies and everything. But, still work to be done.
Okay.
Yeah, over the years, I know, you mentioned the manpower issue. That's, I think, one thing FEMA has acknowledged, the staffing. They've also blamed tech issues to some level in processing all these claims. And really, I think much of the conversation has been just the volume and trying to do it as quickly as they can and being fair. They say they're not playing favorites, though. They're processing the claims as quickly as they can. I take it that is not really what you've seen.
Well, certainly, Chris, what I would say is that it has come to light that people who are in positions of power have abused that power and advanced their claims in their personal interest over the interest of the people of northern New Mexico who've suffered for the last 4 years, nearly 4 years. And it's deeply disappointing when you have the director, Jay, and the deputy director, Jennifer, who've been paid out on substantial six-figure claims. Jay Mitchell and his wife, $500,000. Jennifer and her wife, $250,000. My phone has been nonstop with clients saying, look, how is it that they can get those settlements when we're still here waiting? Look, as the former state auditor and as somebody who's been in different positions of leadership, leaders eat last. And if you want to have credibility running FEMA, then you make sure every single claim is paid before you advance your own personal interest. You have an obligation to do that, in my opinion. And not only did he decide not to wait to eat last, he didn't stand in line. He jumped the line. And in fact, evidently applied pressure when his own staff members told him, Jay, we love you, but you got to wait in line. So then he transferred the file. Look, whether in every story there are gradations of people's perspective on what the truth is, and the truth will eventually come out. Mm-hmm. And hopefully it's after the federal government decides to open an investigation, whether it's through the Inspector General, the U.S. Attorney, somebody has got to investigate and blow the lid off of this.
Yeah.
Because typically, forgive the pun, where there's smoke, there's fire. And if we now know that the director was comfortable exerting inappropriate power to prioritize his claim, and we know the deputy director exerted power and had her claim advanced, I'm deeply concerned about which other people in their universe of friendlies might have had their claims advanced as well.
Yeah. And that's a frustration that I heard loud and clear in just talking to people in Mora, a couple of years ago. Again, in our investigation that we published, I took that concern to FEMA, and they actually wanted me to interview somebody who had been partially paid out. Well, talk in the town was, well, this person has also been in commercials and the governor's been to his property. And so to some of this person's neighbors, it seemed like he had political friends, and that is why he got paid out. FEMA absolutely denied this claim that they were playing any favorites. They told me, we're dealing with claims as they come in the queue. But again, that's the perception by a lot of folks, is like it kind of depends on who you know. And so here we are years later talking about the same kind of accusations and issues of people jumping that line, which seems not only unfair to the folks who've been waiting for 4 years, but also just like very disheartening is the impression I got from some of these people. But I want to talk about some of the legal battles that are also playing out that you guys are involved in. One of the legal battles playing out in federal court last we spoke about had to do with the fact that FEMA at first was not accounting for those non-economic damages that you mentioned. Can you just explain to our listeners what that means, and where does that argument stand today?
Sure. Where that argument stands is FEMA continues to take the position that the victims of the Hermits Peak Calf Canyon fire are not entitled to non-economic damages, when clearly a federal judge has already said that's wrong. That under New Mexico law, they are entitled to non-economic damages for inconvenience, for loss of enjoyment. All of these items that are available under New Mexico law, FEMA has an obligation to compensate these victims. The federal judge was clear-throated in that and issued his opinion. FEMA continued to take the position that that's not true, and that the federal judge, not only did Singleton Schreiber Law Firm get it wrong, also the federal judge got it wrong. And as a result, that ruling is now on appeal. And FEMA continues to push back and fight, as opposed to just doing their job. They have a ruling. Look, you can disagree with Jesse and I when we're sitting across the table from you, but once you've got a ruling from a federal judge, do your job. The federal judge, you made your case, we made our case, the federal judge ruled, do your job. Pay the people of northern New Mexico. Jesse, I just want to ask if you have anything to add to that.
One thing that comes to mind is the fact that they've taken a sort of punitive approach to anyone seeking those non-economic damages. Basically, everyone who is in the administrative appeals process, they are not going to get any sort of administrative appeals decision simply because they are seeking non-economic damages. It would be easy for FEMA to at least issue administrative appeals decisions with respect to economic damages and set aside the non-economic damages issue until later. But they're just letting them stall there, almost punishing them for seeking damages that are available under New Mexico law, damages that FEMA acknowledged were available under New Mexico law in prior fires in New Mexico. So it really doesn't make sense, and it's really harming the victims instead of helping them as is intended.
Can you basically break down for us, like, what is considered an economic damage versus a non-economic damage?
So look, economic damages are exactly what you would think of when you're filing a property damage claim under your insurance policy. So it's going to be for those items that are tangible that you can identify and actually value with certainty. And so we're talking about structures, we're talking about timber, we're talking about belongings that were lost. Those are all your economic damages. And then there are other hard economic damages that you have, which may be you had to relocate to a hotel and you had these economic expenses that you have receipts for that you are able to produce and say, these are my economic damages based on the federal government's negligence. That thankfully, and let me not miss the opportunity, and kind of shame on me for not kind of leading with this, because when I look back over the last 4 years and I realize what Senator Lujan led on in terms of identifying the opportunity to get Congress to be held accountable and set aside nearly $5.5 billion to compensate northern New Mexicans who've been injured, that was a Herculean task and in some ways unprecedented. Certainly at that level, it's unprecedented. Now, I'd also say that the negligence of the federal government and what they caused to have happen with over 340,000 acres burning, that was also unprecedented. But you still got to give credit where credit's due. And I failed to lead with that. And I still look back and I go, look, I've advanced legislation I believed in with advocacy, and that's not easy. And in Congress, I really think one needs to pause and give that credit. The challenge is then the federal government trusted FEMA to administer the fund. And that's where the disaster began, or that's where the re-traumatization began of northern New Mexico. But let's coming back to the economic versus non-economic damages in New Mexico are things like inconvenience, loss of enjoyment. If you have had your property for 14 generations and you are used to being able to enjoy watching your livestock roam in your acreage in northern New Mexico through the timber that sits on your property, and you can no longer enjoy that, there is value to that.
And how does that get calculated? I mean, that's got to be a difficult task, right? Because it's easier to put a dollar figure on things like a structure or a hotel payment, but yeah, how do you calculate something like that, the non-economic damage?
And that's a great question, Chris. And I think that what we've seen in other places are that you identify basically particular common sets of circumstances, and you rate those sets of circumstances at different tiers. And if you have outstanding circumstances that don't fit into one of those boxes, so you have level 1, 2, 3, and 4. Level 1 being, man, you have been, not only did you think your livestock was burning and you were watching and you had that trauma, and not only did you lose the acreage of, you're an elder and you've been on this patio for generations looking out on your land, but you also fled in fear of your own life. Maybe you're a tier 1 plus. So then you get a little bit of an extra compensation for that being a tier 1 plus. But you set 1, 2, 3, and 4, and each of those levels have a certain dollar amount tied to them. And then it's up to people like Jesse and me to make the case on your behalf, Chris, if you're a resident of northern New Mexico that would have been injured, to make the case as to why this should be a level 1, 2, 3, or 4, or a 3 plus, or a 1 plus. So it can be done. You have to set up a system. You have to identify common sets of circumstances and evaluate them accordingly. Now, not everybody's going to be in the exact same situation, right? That's why you have a claims process. Otherwise, it would be an ATM machine. I put in my PIN. I'd say I'm a level 1 and you give me money. But there's a claims process so that those who understand the situation best can be their advocate.
It's just that Judge Browning did that analysis for a group of 12 claimants and awarded non-economic damages somewhat along those lines, basically where there were tiers, but now that is being appealed to the 10th Circuit, so there won't be a resolution of that for some time. And ideally, we'd like to have a process in place to move these along quicker than waiting for the 10th Circuit to rule.
And Chris, can I get back to Gabby just on one more point, because I know you like the detail. The other thing that I left out that I'm surprised Jesse didn't correct me on is another huge issue that they're suffering in northern New Mexico on is erosion damages. So you have erosion damages from those fires, then you have subsequent what we call cascading effects, and those are causing economic damages to remediate from floods and the erosion of the land and then having to rebuild that. And so I think that that's just another example of economic damages that I failed to mention.
Yeah. We'll be right back with more on New Mexico News Insiders.
Hey guys, Chad Brummett here with New Mexico Frontiers, the KRQE original series that focuses on tech and innovation happening right here in New Mexico. We've got a lot of great stories about various businesses, technology, and of course space exploration. So make sure that you follow us on air at KRQE and Fox New Mexico, as well as our KRQE YouTube channel online. In the meantime, let's get back to the New Mexico News Insiders.
So yeah, that is one of the conversations that also came up when we went and spoke to people who were impacted, is just the amount of generational loss in northern New Mexico. Like, you know, I had a man tell me we planned on giving this property to my grandchildren. It's been in his, in his life for so many years. His mom used to live, 100 feet away from him, and just generations living on a section of property that is just gone. And how do you come to a number to calculate that? Is it something that people kind of have to hire attorneys for, or are some people also navigating this on their own?
It's an excellent question, and the answer is yes. Some people are navigating them. Some people are navigating on their own. I will tell you it's our experience, and objectively, and Jesse, it's been some time since I think we've done the numbers, but I remember about 2 years out or so, after having advocated for clients that got settlement offers prior to bringing us on as attorneys, and then settlement offers after we advocated for all the compensation they were entitled to, there was an exponential increase, not exponential, but there was a substantial increase in the amount of the settlement offer. Why? Because Jesse's an expert. Jesse is an attorney. He understands how to bring in experts to evaluate damages and to write expert reports and to document those damages, to be able to get the full recovery clients are entitled to, and the victims of the Hermits Peak Calf Canyon fire are entitled to. Look, it's like many other kind of legal battles that involved settlements, which is, look, if you're in a car collision, the insurance company is going to want you to make sure you don't get a lawyer, and they're going to make you an offer to get this thing settled right away. I can almost assure you 10 out of 10 times, if you don't accept that check and you get expert counsel who actually understands what all your damages you will be entitled to recover for, you will be in a stronger position if you hired an attorney.
And lowball offers can certainly be enticing. One of the things that's key here is that when you're accepting compensation, you're releasing FEMA with regard to certain line items in order to receive that compensation. So it's hugely problematic in the context of things like erosion, where there are these cascading damages. If you accept a lowball offer up front, you can't pursue any of those cascading impacts, and that's one of the issues we're seeing, certainly as so much time has gone on where people haven't been able to rebuild. So if you did accept an early offer, you're now shut off from seeking any further damages.
I can see how that would be appealing, though. Somebody's like, I just need some money at this point. I don't want to be tied up in litigation, nor can they afford to do that. Last I checked, you guys are representing roughly 1,500 clients. Is that still accurate? Ballpark?
We at one point represented over 2,000 individuals. We've settled many claims at this point. And it's hard to give an exact number because you have families, households. Depending on how you count, you can get to different numbers. But let's just say this. It's several hundred individuals who have substantial claims who've yet to be made whole.
Yeah. So broadly speaking, out of those hundreds of claims, what do you all identify, if you can pinpoint just one thing, what do you think has been the biggest hurdle? There's probably a lot you can think of.
There's so many things I can think of. So my head's spinning when I think about all the hurdles that FEMA has put up to avoid compensating the victims of the Hermits Peak Calf Canyon fire. I'm going to turn it to Jesse to let him speak with specificity on one that comes to his mind.
Well, for me, the focus needs to be more on pragmatic policies instead of the types of punitive policies that we were discussing. Another recent example that kind of illustrates the issue is with regard to the water contamination in Mora County. If you have now gotten your well tested and you have results showing that there are issues with your well, you likely can't do too much about it right now because it's at a time where you can't supplement your claim. And if you're in the administrative appeals process, you can't request to reopen your claim. So you're just kind of stuck having to, in many cases, finance water filtration system and hope that at some point in the future that they decide to compensate you for your losses. And so it's just these over and over we see examples where instead of taking the pragmatic approach that helps the victims of this fire, accomplishes the purpose of the act, we're instead seeing punitive delays and making people wait around. It just is a systemic issue that needs to be resolved.
Is there a fear that as this process goes on and some people wait while other claims are being paid out, that perhaps the money will not be enough? Has that come up in your minds at all, that the federal government has not set aside enough money to deal with those who are still waiting?
I think everybody has that fear. I think it's fair to say that everybody has that fear. For me, it is difficult to project because I certainly know what my client's position is. I know what their claims are at, but I've got colleagues who also represent hundreds of individuals. So it's hard for me to project. It's kind of like I've got 3 cards of a 5-card hand, and I don't know what those other 2 cards are. So it's difficult for me to project that. Here's what I would say. I would say, first of all, it's disappointing we've had 2 failed leaders in the position of director. Jay Mitchell has now failed us. We don't trust him anymore. The people of northern New Mexico don't trust him anymore, and for good reason. So without knowing what we're looking at in the months to come, whether we're going to have a trustworthy leader of that office, it's difficult to know the answer to that question. I will say this. I don't think the heart of our leadership, you had our 2 United States senators lead on that letter calling for Jay Mitchell's resignation. They're tuned in, and I suspect, and I would hope, that at the end of the day, the federal government's going to do the right thing. And if there is a question as to the durability of the fund, I'm optimistic. I mean, the facts that underlie this case are so egregious that I think most members of Congress would still want to do the right thing, even in these difficult times. Like, that's not me being Pollyannish, not understanding how dysfunctional Washington is right now. But like I said, the facts are so egregious here, I'd be hard-pressed to believe that Congress would turn its back on northern New Mexico and leave people uncompensated.
We know as of this recording, today being February 9th, the FEMA Claims Office Director, Jay Mitchell, he has not stepped down from his position. He also hasn't answered any questions from the media about these accusations, which again are that he bumped his own claims up to the front of the line to get payout for ahead of many others who are waiting. He's not the first person to lead the office, as we've discussed. He still faces scrutiny from the public here. What do New Mexicans need from leadership at this FEMA claims office that says itself it needs to be functioning for years?
Sure. There is a model to the west that we can look at that has 70,000 victims, that has exponentially more damages than our claim had here, and it's in California. Under the PG&E bankruptcy, one of the things that they established in California and the legislature funded was a system that set up the Victims Trust, the Fire Victims Trust Fund. And it was administered with high competence because they brought in experts in a claims process. And I will tell you that Jesse and I sat at the tables 3 years ago saying, look, there are professionals out here that can administer claims. So why not bring in highly respected retired judicial leaders that Northern New Mexico knows, that are from those communities, to oversee a claims process by claims professionals? I'll just give you a little, look, the next part of this evaluation has to be at some point, has the administrative overhead, which is coming out of the corpus, which is coming out of the $5.4+ billion, coming out of that is Jay Mitchell's salary, and every salary and expense that he can is coming out of the victims fund that was allocated by Congress. And I will tell you that it appears to us that that overhead is a multiplier higher of what they experienced and utilized in the Fire Victims Trust in California. So the model that we said, look over there, they know how to do it. California understands what it means to deal with wildfires and compensate victims. California gets it. Look at their model. The hubris of FEMA said, no, we got this. Why don't you two sit down and we'll do our job. Well, here we are almost 4 years later, still waiting for them to do their job. So I would say what needs to happen is, again, we need to get trusted leadership from New Mexico, and we need a claims process that works for the victims. And there's a model out there that has professionals who arbitrate and mediate claims in a claims process such as this.
So you're saying take FEMA out of it and put in a third party who...
No, I think FEMA ought to contract with those professionals that know how to adjudicate claims and to value claims. Jesse might have a slightly different opinion, but what are your thoughts, Jesse?
It's certainly valid, and they do have a contract in place with one of these groups that has the experience and can make up for these issues. They're just not really utilizing them, and that's with respect to arbitration and their contract with the JAMS organization, who is incredibly experienced and able to overcome all of these issues quickly if they would just let them do what they're good at, because fires is not what FEMA is good at.
Interesting. Today, as we sit here, have most of the victims of the Hermits Peak Calf Canyon wildfire been fully compensated for their losses?
Good.
With respect to our clients, none of them have been fully compensated. So people have accepted certain partial offers, but then they just go into the administrative appeals process, which is really just a black hole, and no one's getting administrative appeals decisions. So no one is being fully compensated who is at least represented by counsel. Some people may have accepted offers for full settlement who are doing it by themselves, but otherwise it's not complete in any way. Certain categories of damages across the board have just been unacceptable, and that's what we're seeing consistently across basically all represented claimants.
And look, we're here for the long run. This is what I told our clients when we stood up the office when I came in over 3 years ago and said that we were going to build out a system that serves New Mexico and New Mexicans. Singleton Schreiber will continue to fight until the very last victim is compensated. And sadly, our clients haven't been fully compensated. And we are going to continue to advocate and lean in until we believe they've gotten exactly what they deserve as a result of the damages suffered strictly due to the federal government's negligence.
Given the wide amount of people that have been displaced, if you will, do you get the impression in talking with these folks that they plan to rebuild in Mora or in these areas that have been so hard hit?
I mean, if you are not from New Mexico, it's hard to understand the people's connection to community and to the land and to the history of northern New Mexico. having run statewide several times, having served statewide, and now being in this position where I have an office in Mora, I have an office in Vegas, I have an office in Albuquerque, Farmington, Las Cruces. Singleton Triber is very sensitive to our clients who have this incredibly beautiful and deep connection to those communities. And quite honestly, more specifically, to the land. These are 14 generations. These are people who hundreds of years ago established the acequia system in northern New Mexico. These are people who they sit in our office and they bring in their documents on their home, and we're like, whose name is this on this deed? And it's like, oh, that was my grandpa's dad, which makes that person my great-grandpa, right? It's like, well, the deed was never transferred. Like, here we are 3 or 4 generations later, and it's why? Because they said they could have the house. We lived there, and then the next generation lived there, and the next generation. I mean, it's so beautiful. From a legal standpoint, it presents some challenges. In fact, I think we even had a couple of clients, it's really, again, for me, like, this is the happiest part of the interview for me. It's so tragic. My heart is heavy for what our clients and the people of northern New Mexico have been through. But when I think about the fact that we've had title documents brought into our office that are in Spanish, and that we've had to have professional translators make sure that we were getting it right. What beautiful history. Like, there's one state in the union that has this kind of history. It's New Mexico, and nowhere else more so than in northern New Mexico. And there's a reason those people will rebuild. It's because not fire, not rain, not the federal government's continued abuse that dates back several generations, that abuse. Those folks, by and large, they're not going anywhere. They'll rebuild. I'm optimistic.
Well, is there anything else that we're missing, Brian or Jesse, that you'd like to add or want people to better understand?
No, quite frankly, I like ending on a good note, and that made me really happy to talk about the communities that I love so much that really are unlike, I've been all 33 counties in New Mexico many times, and northern New Mexico is just different. It's just different. There is an authenticity, humility, a grit, tenacity, and resilience that doesn't come from anything other than having families be on that land for multiple generations. And it's just so pure in so many ways. I am inspired by those communities. And I look forward to helping them tell their story someday, even at a greater level. And it's going to be when they come back from the ashes. Jesse, what did I leave out?
Nothing really. I mean, New Mexicans' resilience is truly impressive, and we're not going anywhere. We're going to continue fighting for them as until they get the recovery they are entitled to.
Mm-hmm. Look, that can't happen if you don't have trust. My clients are flipping out, and they have been through so much trauma, and now to have this be the next chapter of the story, like whether there is absolute corruption here or whether they're, at best, on any given day you evaluate this, at best, you have a severe appearance of impropriety. And with that severe of an appearance of impropriety or corruption, whichever of those two things is true, you've got to have a change in leadership that the people can trust. Otherwise, we'll never get these claims resolved. And the people of northern New Mexico deserve better. Jay Mitchell's got to go.
Well, Brian and Jesse, thank you both so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
It's been a real pleasure to be back in studio, and I think this is my first time on the podcast, so that's kind of cool.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
So thanks for hosting us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Brian Colon and Jesse Gallegos for taking the time to catch us up on the whole process with the Hermits Peak Calf Canyon wildfire and just the challenges that they've been facing trying to get these claims paid. It's wild to think that we're approaching 4 years.
Yeah, and we'll let you know if we see any movement in the claims office and that controversy that continues swirling. As we record this, there has been no response from Jay Mitchell or a decision made despite those calls for his resignation. So clearly a big story to keep a watch on. So.
Yeah, if you all have any story ideas or people you'd like to hear from on our show, always feel free and reach out. I'm Gabrielle.Burkhart@krqe.com via email and gburknm on social media.
I'm at Chris McKee TV, also chris.mckee@krqe.com. Thanks for watching and listening.